It wasn't that long ago that Wonder Girl Yara Flor was the buzz in the DC Comics fandom. It felt like Yara Flor was destined as the breakout character for DC Comics in 2021. They had their own solo series coming up. They were going to play a major part in DC Future State, and they had their own TV show coming up in production for the CW. Alas, we are in the early part of 2022, and all of that is gone. All the buzz and excitement that DC Comics were able to generate coming out of Fandom, the first one that they did, over Yara Flor with the wonderful character design and the excitement that they were able to generate, we've learned that Wonder Girl will be canceled abruptly at issue number 7. They did solicit in issue number 8 for February of this year, and that will not be coming out, and we'll get into the details here in a second. Many of you will remember, or maybe you were a part of it, the Yara Gang was one of the biggest things going in the early part of 2021 when people first got the idea of who Wonder Girl Yara Flor was going to be. This was an exciting new character. It was going to be a Brazilian Amazon that was going to be in training. Obviously, we saw Wonder Girl as Wonder Woman during DC's Future State event. So we started to see the cracks in the character almost from the beginning. Because if you read the Wonder Girl 2-part story within Future State, it was a pretty interesting character. I actually quite like that story quite a bit. But there's also a version of the character in the Justice League series. Felt like a completely different character than we got in the Yara Flor story. And then there was also a Superman and Wonder Woman story with another version of Yara Flor. So it seemed like DC Comics really didn't have a voice or an idea of who this character was going to be. But they were still moving forward. There was going to be a TV show on the CW, and the character was getting her own solo series by one of the best artists that DC Comics has out there, Joelle Jones. Unfortunately, she was also going to be writing the series. Now, there are fans out there of Joelle Jones writing. Me personally, I'm not really one of them. She's not the worst writer in the history of comic books or even in the present, but she's not the best writer either. She really just can concentrate on the art because she's one of the premier artists in the entire industry, but the writing just hasn't quite caught up yet. To give her a series that she was going to be writing and illustrating seemed like a tall order for Joelle Jones. Obviously, they had done that in the past when they had that Catwoman series that Tom King absolutely sabotaged with his Batman 50 not wedding that happened. If you remember, the Catwoman series was going to be jumping out of that, and it basically killed all interest in there, and it never just really picked up the steam that it needed to, unfortunately. There were a few ideas spouting out of DC 5G, which was repackaged as Future State, that I think a lot of people were really into. Yara Flor is one of them, and it certainly seemed like not only DC Comics, but Warner Media were into it as well. They were producing a show for their Arrowverse. Obviously, we're seeing Naomi and some other characters being introduced on the CW, and Wonder Girl Yara Flor was going to be one of them. Unfortunately, soon after they announced production and that the show was going to go forward, it was unceremoniously dropped, and it didn't move forward. But the Yara Gang still had one last hope. It was the Wonder Girl series from Joelle Jones. And Joelle Jones obviously did the character design, which is absolutely fabulous. It's one of those things that when you see it, you're like, wow, that is a fantastic looking comic book character. I want to know what that character is doing. I read, I think the first 2 issues. I read a little bit into the 3rd issue, and I just dropped off. The character just never really... They never established a purpose of the character. She was going back to Brazil to rediscover her roots. That's an interesting documentary series or potentially an interesting streaming show. But as an action-based comic story, it wasn't all that compelling to me. And it sounds like it wasn't really compelling to a lot of people, as the comic book has been abruptly canceled at issue number 7. And as I mentioned earlier, they had already solicited issue number 8 for February of this year, and the content that was going to be in that comic book is actually being repackaged and will be included in the upcoming Trial of the Amazons Wonder Girl number 1 and 2 for the big Trial of the Amazons event book that's coming out. But this also speaks to a larger problem that DC Comics has really created almost overnight, where somehow they have too many Wonder Woman characters. When you had the Wonder Girl series, you still had Diana Prince in Wonder Woman, and a couple of Wonder Woman series at that. You had Queen Hippolyta as the Wonder Woman on Justice League, and then you had Nubia as the new Queen of the Amazons, and of course you have the Nubia and the Amazons series coming out. That's 4 different comic book series whose primary character is Wonder Woman or a version of Wonder Woman. That is Batman levels of overkill, and unfortunately, I have a lot of respect for Wonder Woman and Diana Prince and the history of the character, but Wonder Woman isn't Batman, especially in comic books. You know, Batman can probably carry 30 new comic books in a month, if we're being completely honest with each other, but Wonder Woman really struggles to carry one. There was a time where you had the Wonder Woman series, which I didn't think was very good. Then you had Justice League Dark starring Wonder Woman as essentially the leader of the team. That was really good. So you had one good version of the character. And even then, Wonder Woman struggled to carry two books. So now you have lesser versions of Wonder Woman herself, not being Diana Prince, being a lead in so many books. You almost wonder, what the hell are DC Comics thinking? If you want to make Wonder Woman important and you want to elevate the character and the lore, you need to bring in a big name creator, like somebody that's going to bring some juice into the characters and the lore in the Amazons. Joelle Jones on a Wonder Girl series as an artist is a big deal, but they really needed to back it up with a big name writer, which of course they're not going to do because they're not even putting big name, high talent comic creators on Wonder Woman. And, you know, we've got this Trial of the Amazons event that was coming up. If you look at the names of the creators, there was one creator that has a name currently that's well respected within comic books, and that is Joelle Jones. You look at it, it's like Michael Conrad, Becky Cloonan, Vita Ayala, Michelle Williams. Like, who are they thinking trying to run with such a big, sweeping, expansive event book with no star power behind it? You know, Wonder Woman, the character in herself, is a star, but doesn't drive her own book. You got to have something behind it that sweetens the pot. And then this Trial of the Amazons was destined for failure from the very beginning, just probably from concept. But now that you know that Joelle Jones probably has little to nothing to do with the entire event other than possibly illustrating some of the Wonder Girl tie-in books, that's got to be pretty disappointing. There's just nobody going out there going, you know what I'd like to spend $50 on? A comic book event with Michael Conrad, Becky Cloonan, and Vita Ayala. Like, get out of here with that stuff. DC Comics really needs to look at their line, who their stars are, and put them on the right books. Yara Flor shouldn't have failed. Yara Flor shouldn't be canceled after 7 issues. You had a superstar artist. They just needed to put a good writer on there and not dilute the Wonder Woman lore, the character and the associated characters so much in such a short amount of time. What did they think was going to happen? Of course, there's not enough market to support all these books. The fact that Newbie and the Amazons hasn't been canceled already, I find baffling. Perhaps a Vita Ayala comic book gets a little bit more leeway in terms of sales and interest than a Joelle Jones comic book does these days, which I think is unfortunate because one of them has a chance to be a superstar in the industry and the other one is going to be a cautionary tale in 5 years on what not to do and how to destroy your career. If you're part of the Yara gang, I imagine you're very disappointed. I'm disappointed. This is a character I had high hopes for. This is a character that I was very interested in. But you could see from the outset in Future State, they had no idea who Yara Flor was, what her voice was, what her mission was. You get into the solo series, once again, she's discovering her roots. Well, that's interesting, but what's the mission of the character? What's the purpose of the character? To introduce readers into Brazilian culture? There are entire networks of channels on television that will do that for you. You don't need a comic book to do that. And the series really needed a hook and a selling point better than Yara Flor is a gorgeous character that has a lot of potential. You know, that can only get you so far. That could get eyes on the product, but it's not going to keep them there unless you really had a compelling story. They just forgot to deliver that. And I do believe that when the CW and Warner Media really decided not to continue on with the Wonder Girl TV show, kind of the beginning of the end for the character, where the long-term appeal just wasn't going to be there, maybe even for DC Comics. So I find this unfortunate. The character deserved better. It's a great design. Hopefully someone with a little bit of talent and some vision will get a hold of the character at some time in the future and be able to do something with Yara Flor, but abruptly canceled at issue number 7. And you could see the writing on the wall. They really did dilute the whole Wonder Woman line so fast. It wasn't even funny. If you're interested in more information concerning Wonder Woman Trial of the Amazons, I actually did a full video up on it with some of my criticisms and some quotes, not only from the creative teams, that are on the event itself, but some of the DC executives and why they're doing it, and some of the places that I think they're wrong on that. That video is right here. I think you'll like it. You know, there's a lot of information in there, and I think you should check it out.